parents expected to keep their kids safe. You know, our business is pretty simple. We have to get kids to school on time safely every day. So we're a school bus contracting company. So we transport almost 100,000 children every morning and every afternoon.
Switzer-Carty has developed a tremendous reputation of safety and security for children in this industry.
We have a fleet of 1,500 vehicles doing 28 million kilometers a year.
Is it okay to allow emotion to affect certain decisions on any level?
To me, business should be on an honor system, respect.
How do you stay sound in the ideologies that you have around money, cash flow, capital, all of that? How do you stay level-headed?
I might be the one with my hands on the wheel technically in the organizational structure, but it's all the people that are with me, behind me, that are making the thing go.
All of us working together to create safety for the students that ride our buses.
I tell people all the time, and it's cliche, I guess, but if they rely on me for every idea.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Meeting Gold Show, Season 2. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's Episode 3. Yes, Episode 3. Johnny gave me the head nod. And Season 2, the reason we update our season because we want to discuss with individuals who are well-versed in specific areas. Today, we've got a gentleman who has bought, sold, been a part of multiple different companies in the similar industry, but understands business. He's a very humble guy, but like the back of his hand with his eyes closed. I will personally say from our coffees and stuff. But Jim Switzer, co-founder of Switzer-Carty. That's the correct title, right? Co-founder of Switzer-Carty?
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder and current president and CEO of Switzer-Carty Transportation.
Jim, we've known each other for a while because your son, Ben, and it's been a great intro because I really look up to you in the sense that you have a very, I would like to say in a very good way, an old-fashioned sense of business. It's still a handshake. It's still a look in the eye. It's still that loyalty that you give to somebody, and that's how you run yours.
That's correct.
You've told me that countless times.
Yeah, I'm probably old school that way, that to me, business should be on an honor system, respect, and my word is as good as any legal agreement. Right? Yeah. So that's how I was growing up in the business. That's the way I conduct my business now. And obviously I have lots of legal stuff that goes on, but reality for me is when I shake somebody's hand, that's the deal.
It's the word.
That's the deal.
I want to ask you, where did that come from? Because for me, I learned that a lot as a young age from mentors, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Guys like you, guys like my dad, who have specifically said a handshake is crucial. It represents more than just, intimacy of touching hands. Where did you learn that from? Was it a young age?
Well, I think my parents for sure, because that was the way they brought us up, to treat people with dignity and respect, and that if you committed to something, you followed through. Yeah. So at a young age, and then I had the pleasure of working with a gentleman when I first started in the business, actually as a teenager, as a summer job, Brian Babcock from Babcock Bus Lines.
Oh, really?
And, so he was just a terrific gentleman that had a very high moral and respectful way of dealing with people, and learned a lot from him, and I worked for him for about 15 years. So my parents and Brian Babcock were very influential in terms of who I am today, and obviously how I conduct business today.
So Jim, we got to skip to the fun question here. I want to ask you, would you ever do Undercover Boss?
You know what? When I worked, my style and I hate to pigeonhole anybody with a style, first of all, but if you were asked how I manage, it's a lot of management by walking around. I know that's old school cliche, so I'm probably dating myself.
Walking around the floor, yeah.
But I do. I spent a lot of time, even when I was the senior guy at the multinational for the Canadian region, I traveled to every facility, and I never went in the front door. I always went in the back door. I always talked to the people on the floor that were what I call always doing the real work, where the real work gets done. And I would just spend time chatting with them. And the manager that was in that facility would always get my time, but usually the last person I wanted to talk to. And so when I left the multinational, it was interesting because I had somebody send me an email and say, Jim, you could never be undercover boss because we always know who you are. And because I always spent time talking to the people that do the real work. And even my business today, I just spent today at a facility at a meeting with drivers, and I know they look at me with two heads when I say I'm the least important guy in the company. When it comes to keeping children safe, I'm the least important guy. So I spend all my time talking to the important people who are the people that are at the grassroots, that are doing the real work, because they're the ones that know how to do the business. So.
And now I wanted to ask you, you don't just have one branch of your business.
No.
There's not just, it's not just one headquarters in Toronto that services thousands of buses.
No.
Can you just give us a little background so people understand what they're talking about when you say Switzer-Carty?
Sure. So we're a school bus contracting company. So we transport almost 100,000 children every morning and every afternoon. We have a fleet of 1,500 vehicles doing 28 million kilometers a year in 9 different facilities. So with 1,700 employees. So we started in 2011 with 50 employees and turned it into what it is today. And people look at that and say, "Wow, that's pretty big." But reality for us is our culture is very important. So what I just explained about management by walking around, people feeling that they can contribute. We have a whole strategy of treating our people obviously with dignity and respect, but everybody contributes. So as I said, when I'm walking around and this morning or the afternoon, I was in a branch talking to our people there, and inevitably you learn something. Somebody comes up with a great idea. So I'm a great idea implementer, not necessarily
you
creator.
You put yourself in the situations that create good ideas.
Yeah, well, or you create an environment where people feel that they're contributing and a part of the organization, and great things happen when that happens, because I tell people all the time, and it's cliche, I guess, but if they rely on me for every idea and every solution, we're going to drive the bus in the ditch very quickly.
Interesting.
So when I've got 1,500 or 1,600 minds working together, I might be the one with my hands on the wheel technically in the organizational structure, but it's all the people that are with me, behind me, that are making the thing go. So
how do you make people feel confident and comfortable in their work environment?
I think it is about what does the company stand for. I think most organizations are a function of who's at the top of the organization. I've worked in numerous different organizations and organizations that were very autocratic. It creates a different environment than an organization where the person or the senior people are very inclusive. So it drives it through the organization, in my opinion. So if you have a very autocratic leader that really it's their way or the highway or no input required from anyone in the organization, there's a different culture than we need you to participate, we need you to be a part of this, and tell us what you think. Yeah. So that seems very rudimentary and very simple, but it's very true. The organizations are different, and I think that when Doug Carty and I formed our organization, we were pretty definite that we're going to treat people with dignity and respect. We're going to walk around this company and learn what we need to from those that do the real work, and we're going to be a leader. So what I'm kind of seeing here is you're hiring people who genuinely crave more responsibility in their workplace, because it sounds like you almost expect that out of people, a responsibility of not just plugging away, punching in and out of your job, but more importantly, one, of course, keeping children safe is your number one ideal. Absolutely. And two, making people feel like they almost are required to contribute, but because they want to. Yeah. And you earn people's respect. You never ask for it. So, we're a growth company. So as a growth company, sometimes maintaining your culture is one of the hardest things to do, because you're bringing on employees. If you acquire a firm, you're taking on a culture that may not totally jive with your culture. And I learned very early in my career that you never ask anybody for respect. You earn it. So as a growing company, that's always a challenge for us, because one of our competitive advantages in our industry is that we've still maintained that family feeling, that family culture, even though we like to say we have a corporate structure with a family atmosphere.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to maintain. And, you know, I've seen opportunity in our industry all the time, and where I see people that grow their company, but they don't know whether they're a family business or a corporation. And there's a real difference between the two. We've managed to meld the two. And that's been some of our competitive advantage as we grow, because family businesses can grow to a size where it becomes more complex and you need more of a corporate structure, but they're a family business and it's hard for them to make that transition to corporate. Corporations sometimes get too big and lose the whole
too corporate
personal touch. Yeah, it's too corporate.
I love that word, because I think on a smaller scale, we'll say, I don't want to be a corporate company.
Yeah.
You know, and it's because unfortunately a lot of people associate a corporate company with a very cold feeling, I think.
But it doesn't have to be. I would say, you know, we're a small company at 1,600 employees, but
small company.
You know, but 50 was a small company where I knew all 50 people by name. At 15 or 1,600, you can't possibly know everybody's name every day, but you have to have a corporate culture that wins the day. And I learned a lot from working with the multinationals and big corporations, because there's lots of structure, there's lots of things that you have to do that are healthy in an organization. It's just sometimes, though, and I'm not saying every large corporation, I'm not whitewashing everyone, but a lot of them, they get so tied up in that part of it that they lose the family or personal touch in a company. So we've always been very careful as when we grow. We could be a company twice the size we are today if we took advantage of every opportunity that came in front of us.
Interesting.
But we didn't, because some things just were not a fit, either geographically, either corporately, like structure, or culturally wasn't a fit for us. So we were selective on where we grew, but we've managed to grow exponentially by pinpointing where we wanted to grow, how we wanted to grow, and who were good fits with us. So that's one piece of advice that I put out to entrepreneurs all the time, is that don't grow for the sake of growing, because that could be the absolute death knell of your business. You got to grow strategically, and it's got to fit with what your plan is, and have a plan how you want to grow. And I would say Doug Carty and I, we definitely had a plan.
You embodied that.
Yeah, well, how we wanted to grow, where we wanted to grow, and what was a good opportunity for us. Because there's lots of businesses for sale, but you got to be strategic, I think, on how does it fit with your business. Does it fit with your current business, or is it a new line of business you want to do? You just got to have a strategy on why are you doing it, and just growing for the sake of growing. Other entrepreneurs may have been very successful at that, but to me, it had to fit. And so for Doug and I, it was almost like putting puzzle pieces together as we grew. And the interesting thing was, as we grew, we had more opportunity come to us as we started to grow.
And you probably felt more confident that you could manage those opportunities better than another company would, than just saying yes and overselling it right out the get-go. That you were confident enough to know that you could handle the exponential work that's being added to you, prior than what you would have had before.
Well, that's one of the things that I talk about when I say that some companies, particularly in our industry, you don't know whether you're a family business anymore or a corporation.
Yeah.
Because you can't do everything. And I'm going to tell you, as an entrepreneur, one of the worst things or hardest things for some entrepreneurs to do is to let go. You got to hire professional people to help you out, because you can't take on everything. I'm blessed with my team of managers is second to none. They're the best in the industry. They're awesome. Like, Doug and I couldn't have done what we do today without those people. But we recognized as we moved along, we need competent, capable, professional managers that can help us grow. And because no entrepreneur can do everything. So as you grow, that's one of the things you got to think your way through, is what's your strategy on management, on managing finance, and as you grow marketing, and as you grow HR, and as you grow operations, because you can't do everything. There's only so many hours in the day. And sometimes for entrepreneurs, that's a hard thing to do, is it's my baby, and oh my God, I'm going to hand over some responsibility, or a lot of responsibility and decision-making, to somebody else.
It's so true because like I feel the same way, and I know a lot of people that do feel the same way, because when you're starting to and trying to grow, you do run into those issues. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, you talked about, and we've had coffee and discussions plenty of times before this, and we know each other quite well, but when you talked about family businesses, and, transitioning into that corporate world, then you also talked about growth. Those two puzzle pieces fit in my mind, and it allows me to ask you this question is, when you go to acquire a new company, typically maybe a family business that has some rough edges, but it has the structure down, and you go to acquire that business, what measurable numbers or things do you look at to identify whether this is a smart purchase or not?
Okay. So there's a whole bunch of things. Obviously, the first one that stands out probably in everybody's mind is, well, the financials all got to work.
Yeah.
Well, in my business, it's all about the contracts and the business behind, like the contractual agreements behind the business,
the
right?
Future business?
No, just the existing business.
Okay.
And so we look at, so there's contracts, because we're a school bus company, you usually have contracts with either private schools, the public schools, the publicly funded schools. So you want to know, obviously, what are those? Because that makes up the financials on how well are you doing. And but for us, it goes deeper than just that. So it's whether it's a fit geographically, fit with the customer. Is it a customer or a geographic area you want to be in? Can you operate successfully in there? Usually when you're buying a family business, sometimes the family members want to retire. Can you put the proper management team in place? The other thing for us is, obviously the state of the assets. What kind of condition are they in? Because we're a heavy asset-based industry. One of our largest costs is buying black and yellow metal school buses. So,
yeah. And tires.
and fuel. But,
new brakes.
So for us, like we look at it on multifaceted. And then, the other thing that's very important to me then is the people within that company. Who do they have? What's the talent like in that company? How have they run? I'm not so worried about, so much about maintenance and policies and processes, because we're going to overlay some of our own on top of the companies that we acquire. But you got to look at, when you do that, that creates upset usually in any transition.
Of course, yeah.
Because it's change. And so we analyze a lot of that stuff. So obviously financial, we usually look at the 3 years prior financials.
3 years prior.
To see how they've done. Now, that's been a little bit of a challenge with COVID because of everybody's had a time through COVID where things financially are up and down. But we obviously
Can I jump in really
Sure.
quick? I want to just quick ask you, what specifically in the financials are you looking at? Is it gross revenue? Is it where they're spending their money? How much? Because I remember you telling me this. Sometimes you look at how much the owner is actually paying themselves, because that, I don't know. Can you talk about that?
So we dissect the financials, right? So I hate to say this, but it doesn't really matter what they're spending, for example, on fuel, because I know what I'm spending on fuel. And usually I'm much larger than the company I'm acquiring. So my scale, my purchasing power and scale of discount is much higher usually than them. So we would analyze their financials in a different way, because we'd overlay our cost on their actual expenses, right?
On their asset expenses.
Yeah, well, because we would know the makeup of every route, for example. We can go in and say, okay, that's that many kilometers. So we break down our business very scientifically. We know the cost per mile for tires. We know the cost per mile for fuel. We know the life cycle of a bus. We actually know by year, make, and model what it costs to run that bus for its life. So we'll look at their financials, but then we actually transpose them in this very detailed model we have into what would that look like in a Switzer-Carty operation.
So you dissect it.
Absolutely.
And almost act like you've just bought
we
the company.
rebuild it. Yeah, and we rebuild it.
Wow.
And so, and I must say, our CFO, Kate Clutterbuck, she's brilliant. And she has these detailed models that are so detailed that we can get to that level of dissection on any new acquisition And sometimes, I'll say this, sometimes we know the business that we're about to buy better than the people that are selling.
I was going to say, you must.
Yeah, just because, and it's some of our experience. So I would go back to corporate when I ran the large multinational division. Those are things that big corporations do, which we've just transposed into our smaller company, which is very much helpful for us. So that's very scientific for us to do, the number crunching. But there's other things. What's the relationship or the reputation of that company in the community? We've just purchased a couple companies recently that have outstanding reputations in the community. Well, that's worth something, because now you've got people that are working for those two companies that are very proud of where they came from. And they're very proud they're in the community. And so we look at a whole bunch of different things as we look at what's the value in that company and what's the value to us. And that's not saying we're ever successful on every acquisition that we look at, because sometimes you just can't have a meeting of the minds of what that value of that business is, because there's the assets, which are very easy. If you ask me to do an evaluation on a bus fleet, what I would ask, or what I would estimate that value to be and what the owner estimates it to be, would be within inches of each other. What it comes down to is what's the goodwill? What are the intangible things that you can't just go and say that camera is worth $2,000. A school bus is worth X thousands of dollars at a certain age. That's easy. It comes down to what does the owner think it's worth, and what do I actually think it's worth through my scientific model that I use.
So it almost goes back to the old-fashioned way of business.
It's somewhat, it does.
You could call it that.
Yeah. And you know what? The one thing is in my career, I've bought close to 40 companies. I would like to say that over half of those people I still stay in touch with today. Yeah. And my thing is that any company I buy, I'm going to be fair. And I want to walk away from the deal thinking I've got the best deal I possibly could, would have liked more. And the person I'm buying says, I've got a good deal for me. I wish I got more, but it's fair. Yeah. And I would argue that Switzer-Carty, being in the position that we are in terms of being able to have first opportunity at some of these family businesses, is because we have a reputation of being fair and straightforward. So,
in such a volatile market in today, how do you go about managing, and what things do you look at when looking to reinvest X amount of liquid cash?
So it's a good question. And I'll speak about our industry, but I always look at our businesses, where do the opportunities lie? And I would say for Switzer-Carty, we're very fortunate that before COVID, we were in a very good position in terms of how we managed the company. Our reputation in the industry was stellar. Our customers were coming to us and offering us more growth at the expense of our competitors all the time, because there was just issues of service delivery in almost every area that we operated in, and we always found it easy to grow. So we were in a good spot. But I predicted, as we went into COVID, that not every company was going to be in that position as we went through COVID. So we really waited for the opportunities through COVID and on the backside of COVID, because we predicted there was going to be opportunity in our industry to be able to grow the company. And I think COVID was very hard on some people. We were fortunate through COVID that, again, the way we managed when COVID came about, we promised our people we were going to pay them 100%, no matter what, whether they were working or not, whether they were at home. We ended up paying 1,500 drivers 100% of their pay, no matter whether they drove or not. And that was our commitment to them at the beginning. And now our customers were very good with us in trying to work our way through how we were going to manage that. But we were in a good spot. And it paid dividends on the back end of that, because when COVID, when the schools went back, I was projecting we'd have 10 to 12% of our people that wouldn't return after COVID. But we ended up with less than 1%. So we ended up with 99% of our people returning, and I think a lot of it was because of what we did and how we treated them through COVID. I didn't want to see anybody hard done by if they worked for Switzer-Carty. And so when we did that, it was a conscious decision that we made to be respectful with our people, support our people. But also, I knew that not every company was in the position to do that, and there'd be opportunity on the other end. So our decision was, let's grow. And so, I just look at opportunities. So whether you sit on cash or you're reinvesting in your business or a different business, it just becomes part of the strategy of what's the company all about. And we were very confident coming out of COVID, even before we were out of it, that we could come out the other end strong enough to be able to start acquiring companies. So
I know a lot of people that need advice on this. The next question I'm about to ask, and it's me included, and this is the whole reason why I do the show, is I learn a lot, and hey, if anybody else can learn too, cool, right? But what I care about is that I actually get something out of our discussion. So managing your finances, reinvesting into the business. This is a big one. So let's use $10,000 a month, okay? So you bring in $10,000 in a month. How much do you rely on the incoming cash flow compared to the cash that you already have in the contracts that are signed? So what I'm asking is, let's say your expenses are $10,000 a month in a business, and you bring in $15,000, okay? So you're netting $5,000, right? And over the course of X amount of months, let's say you get to $60,000 in total expenses so far. With the money that you've earned, how much of that do you set aside for just in case measures or times when things might be slow? So what I'm asking is your percentage of an emergency fund, or because what I want to know is, did you always have this much capital set aside to purchase businesses during COVID? Or did you rely partly on the contracts that were coming in throughout COVID to buy these businesses at a discount?
Yeah, so good question. So I'm going to step back. As an entrepreneur, you probably never feel like you have enough cash in reserve. Never. So I'm just going to say that.
Yeah. Okay,
so,
hey, wait, have you ever felt that way?
Well, no, because we're always growing and we're always working at our financing. But, I always go back to, and if any of the bankers are watching this, that back when Doug and I started in 2011, it really upset Doug and I with our resumes that we'd both, been involved in senior executives at multinational companies with, 60 years experience between the two of us. And but all the banks that we went to when we started the business to grow it considered us a startup. And they kept saying, well, if you don't have 3 years financial, you guys are a startup.
They treated you the same as they would treat me.
Well, and all the bankers out there are going to cringe at me, but it was interesting because I had a gentleman in my career that used to always say, Jim, the banks love me now, but when I needed them, they didn't need me. And now when I don't need them, they need me.
What I find so funny is, like, I could go to the bank tomorrow and they would tell me, you need 3 years.
Yeah.
And they told you the same thing.
That's exactly, but it's standard operating procedure for banks. And I get it on the risk,
yeah.
risk side. They're looking at these two middle-aged guys that have a dream with a school bus, right? So, and it all worked out in the end, but it's always a struggle. So how much do you save? Well, it depends. You're going to always end up with debt covenants on any bank loan you have. So whether it's, an institutional bank or private bank, you're gonna have debt covenants or some financial restriction on your growth, cash, assets. So it's to answer your question, it's about formulas in terms of how are you managing your cash flow, how are you managing your debt, and in our business, because it's heavily contract business, it's somewhat maybe easier than somebody that's just a walk-in sales business, because we could win a contract and prove to them, there's our contract, there's our revenue stream. And after the first 3 years and growing exponentially each year, they grew to trust us. So is it some formula and here's a percentage? No, because every year there was, we always found that our growth went like this, then plateaued for a year, and then another climb. Right. So we were always conscious of cash. We were always conscious of cash flow. And then our debt equity ratios were always important. So, and debt to EBITDA. So when we look at all those figures, we had to balance that. And that's where I say our CFO is awesome. But
to understand all of that is mind-boggling to me.
But the reality is, my suggestion is when the banks trust you on your numbers, on your projections, and you're pretty solid in terms of being, I would say, realistic in your projections, realistic in your expectations. The banks are your advocate when you get going, right? So, but it is a period there where Doug and I got tired of being called a startup when, and we wind the clock 10, 11 years down the road and
no longer a startup.
No. And our issues go away on, financing, and because they've trusted, look what they've done. But at the beginning, entrepreneurs have a hard climb with that. So do I have a secret formula and there's a percentage? No. For us, it was about the next contract or the business that we're buying. What's the underlying basis for it? And I would say that our finance companies now, they're very trusting of what we do and how we do it because we've got a track record. My thing is with entrepreneurs or any business is get that track record as fast as you can because it builds trust with your finance companies, which then believe in you to take the next step. So were there nail-biting times for Doug and I? Absolutely.
So I want to ask, it's not more so not a question, but just something that I notice. You call your company small company. I would look at it and say, by no means is it a small company, and the numbers is not a small company.
Yeah.
But then, you're comparing yourself to Apple or Amazon or those guys. But what I see is you run your company the same as they would.
Yep.
And that's a very interesting thing to notice. And I guess you'll always call yourself a small company, really, no matter how. I mean, unless you're, on Fortune 500, I guess you might always call yourself a small company. Mm-hmm. So my point here is a guy like me, a guy like Johnny, a guy like Timmy, a guy like Ricky, they can be making 10 grand a month, 5 grand a month, 20 grand a month. If they run their company like it's a Fortune 500 company, they'll have no problem growing. Well, what's your comments on that?
Well, I think you've got to have a company that is producing a widget or a service that people want first, right?
Yeah, of course.
But the reality is, if you do, I would say when I buy companies, I see all different levels of sophistication, right? And what I mean by that is business sophistication. And in my career, I've bought companies where the accountant told them at the end of the year how well they did, which is a whole different level of sophistication when I sit down with somebody that says, here's my monthly financials I print off, here's how I know, here's my cash flow, here's my balance sheet, I'm running a profit and loss statement every month along with a balance sheet and a cash flow. Well, I'm going, all right.
You trust them more?
No, not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
So, but it's just the level of sophistication.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you that if anybody's going to sell their business or grow their business exponentially anymore today, I think the level of sophistication in business has increased, and you need either expertise, help, or somebody in your company that can do those things and do the P&L every month with a cash flow and a balance sheet. You need to know where the money's going. But when I look at the level of sophistication of businesses, like when we went to sell our business, well, we didn't go to sell it.
That's actually an interesting topic.
But the reality is, I think for a small company, because we deal with multinational, we compete against multinationals that are owned by very large private equity firms or they're multinational companies. I think they were impressed for a small company. We were pretty sophisticated with the way we ran it. But again, for Doug and I, that was bringing some of our corporate experience to our small company, which I think did not only help us grow our business because we were on top of the business, we knew all the levers in the business. And that's the other thing is we didn't fret over the small things. Like in terms of when you're looking at the levers of your business, in any business, I'm convinced that there's probably about 4 or 5 levers that are either going to make you really successful or really hurt you. So you got to know what those are. and what's the variability on those that's making you float or sink, right? So when I look at, our business, we just made sure we were all over those costs and we knew what they did to our business. And so when we were approached, I think they were very impressed with, this is a relatively small company, but it's run like a professional organization.
And it has the potential to grow exponentially even more.
You can bolt on to it, and away you go. So I think that if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking for selling your business, the best thing you can possibly do is knit it up that it's, where your numbers are, you're doing your monthly financials, you know the ins and outs of your business, which you probably do, but formalize it, right? So, and I'm not a big guy. I'm one of those guys that if you hand me a policy book that's this thick, I'd say, you know what, you've probably lost touch with your people, right? I worked for a company once where I used to always think we're making policy to the lowest common denominator in the company, and it's no way to run a company.
Yeah.
So I would say with people, if, as entrepreneurs and looking at your business, your business, formalize your business and have some solid processes to help you analyze your business. And that's sometimes hard because when you're an entrepreneur, you're sometimes the jack of all trades on everything.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's about stepping back and knowing what levers control your business, right? And if somebody is looking at buying your business, they're going to ask a ton of questions about why this, why that, what's that cost? How about, why is it this way? And I think when you have formal structure in your company and formal processes, and you understand what's driving the business, you have a better opportunity of probably getting a better price for your company.
Yeah.
Right? So.
You talked a little bit about your corporate experience, and I don't want to shade over that because that did teach you a lot of what you need to know, because it was like that immediate start into a company that was like, when you say multinational, can you just quick define what that means for people listening?
I would just say that it's just not, like, I'm an Ontario-based company.
Yeah.
Multinationals are usually either worldwide or North American based. That's what I call them.
Very large.
Yeah, very large. The
elephants.
Yeah.
You're like you're not the mouse, but you're like a baby elephant.
Well, yeah. So that's hilarious. I used to always say with the multinationals when I didn't work for them, like when we were at our own company, I always said, we wanted to be like they were the elephant. They could roll over and squish you. And I think most entrepreneurs, if you're competing against the large companies, they have the resources to roll over and crush you. So you got to be the speedboat that runs around them, right? So
it's not like you can just stop them because it was interesting. I was listening to a podcast by Stephen Bartlett, Diary of CEO, and they made a good point in saying that bigger companies will do everything in their power to stop you. Everything. Once you get to the level of they realize, okay, we're not slowing down the speedboat, then they'll start to strategically partner or deal with you in a sense.
Yeah, or they just understand. Like some of them will look at you and say, what's their, multinationals may look at Doug Carty and I and say, so we lose something to them, but they really can't kill us. And, reality is we're not. We really can't.
Yeah.
We weren't out to kill them or, run them into the ground or anything else. But we just knew we could build a very successful business by sticking to our goals and our vision and not wavering from it. The first year, the first 2 years we started, Doug and I thought we'd grow the business exponentially. In the first 2 years, we lost every bid we bid on. And so we looked at each other and said, uh-oh, because it was the first 2 years of us pouring cash into a business that we thought was going to take off from day one. Well, it didn't. And we refused to do the low price thing that everybody in the industry was doing. We refused to do it. We said that's just asinine. It's the race to the bottom. And we stuck to our guns because we felt that in school busing, parents eventually are going to want a bus to show up on time with a competent, professional, caring person holding onto the wheel. And how do you do that? Well, you got to pay that driver properly. You got to treat them with dignity and respect. You got to train them properly, and you got to give them a vehicle that's well-maintained and reliable. And you can't do that when you're racing to the bottom on price. So we stuck to our guns. 2 years, we didn't win a contract. And And so for us, it was like we didn't waver. And in year 3, we hit a couple of home runs, and it was the start of our business, because then the industry started to shift where customers were saying, how come those guys can have a driver that arrives on time, that kids aren't getting to school an hour late, and all the others aren't?
Anytime we were at just a funny side note, anytime we were at high school and our football bus showed up late, we said, why isn't Switzer-Carty written on the side of the bus?
But I'm going to tell you, that's how we gained business. That our phones started to ring because we were operating in Peel at the time, and we had a driver en route, on time, safely, taking kids to school every day. So the customers eventually started to talk amongst themselves. We started to get phone calls, can you guys come and help us out? And we won a couple bids, and that was it. So in 2011, we had 50 buses. In 2013, we had 80, because we just took work away from our competitors that couldn't do it. And then in 2013, we won 2 bids, and we went from an 80-bus operation to 450. And we took off. And again, how do we separate ourselves in a marketplace with the multinationals? We could provide a driver every day that was competent, capable, professional, and caring. And how do you do that? You treat them with dignity and respect. You train them properly and pay them properly.
Now, let me play devil's advocate here. Because as you grow as a company, it's easier to slack off or forget about customer service or lack in some way of it, right? It's much easier to, because you're much busier, you're making more money, maybe your care for certain clients goes down because of how much they're paying you in comparison to the new clients you've just got. If you stay with a company, we know you've sold now, but if you were 40 years old and you were in the position you were in, you'd probably want to grow the company until you're 60, whatever, right? Over the next 20 years, putting yourself in those shoes, would you see yourself facing that challenge as you grow even bigger and bigger to the size of a potential multinational company? Would you see that become a challenge for you guys? A company that maybe struggles with arriving people on time?
I would say every company has to focus on what they're really all about as they grow, because, the people that, when we always said to our people, we're going to grow, and we're not going to lose the family feel, the family atmosphere. So I would argue that as you grow, it becomes more complex how you do that, that you still can carry that off. So one of our biggest challenges was that what sets us apart from our competitors is our culture. So culture counts. And so we sacrificed growth because we didn't want to compromise culture. And so when we look at that, how do you do that? Well, I went back to management by walking around. I was just spent a full day with one of my facilities, 80 people. Well, I'm going to tell you that's important for those people that we spent a day with them. But how do you keep the personal touch and not just turn into a large corporation that you're a number? And that gets more difficult. And as the owner of the company, my time can only be split as you grow in more locations. You can't be everywhere all at once. So it becomes more of a challenge to grow and maintain culture. And I forget who it was that said that culture eats strategy all day long. But there's a lot of truth to that, because our competitive advantage in our industry is that if you talk to our drivers and our mechanics and our dispatchers, our safety people, I think that one of the reasons they stay at Switzer-Carty is because it's a nice place to work. And why is it a nice place to work? Because everybody treats each other with dignity and respect. Right. And everybody feels like they're part of something. So my advice to entrepreneurs is, as you grow, you just got to be careful. Like, we could have grown much bigger than we are, but we walked away from some growth because it just either wasn't right for us or we couldn't make it work at the time. And so we tell our customers that all the time, because we say to customers, no, we can't, because for growth sometimes, but we explain to them why we can't. And you know what? They're usually okay with it. They say,
and they're almost, if you position it in a way where you say, listen, we want to be able to service you. Yeah. We genuinely have the heart to do it, and we obviously want the business. But at this moment, we cannot because we can't manage it, and we don't want to supply you with crappy quality.
Bingo. Because we won't compromise on it. And we don't. We won't
they respect
compromise.
that.
They do.
And they probably go back to you
they come back
when
to
you
us.
can handle
Absolutely.
it.
So,
You've told me stories about some of those times, too. We don't have time to get into that. But, I mean, it is really interesting how you've played the long game. You have played the long game with your company.
Bingo.
And 10 years later, you might feel like you're still in the beginning stages because you could grow even more than what you are now.
So, and that's the other thing when we set up our company, we set it up to grow. So even for every one of our branches that we set up, so say we win a new contract where we have no presence and it's not an acquisition. So an acquisition is actually an easy way for us to grow because it's existing, you've got employees, you've got facilities.
Yeah.
That's actually, in terms of complexity, that's sometimes easier because it's an existing business that you're working with them to turn it into a Switzer-Carty operation. But when you win a new contract and you go into a new town where you have to find a facility, you have to set it up, you have to hire all your staff, that's complex. But when we set up our business in the beginning, we call it like plug and play. So we knew that in the beginning, so our back office is all automated. So even when we make an acquisition, we switch them all over to the Switzer-Carty back office because in my view, we need one version of the truth across everything. Finance, it's one version of the truth. One process on how we do it in branch A, B, C, D. And when we're setting up a new branch, a branch manager doesn't have to think about what phone system am I putting in? Oh, there it is. I phone that number and it's delivered. What computers do I put in? There's the number you need and it's set. So for us, we've set it up that we can scale our business very easily. And when we set it up, it's pretty much on the same scale and same process of the one that's right next to it. So,
is it okay to allow emotion to affect certain decisions on any level?
I think emotion comes into a lot of people are human, so it's just a matter of how you manage that. So a lot of tough decisions come about when emotions run it, but there's always, in my opinion, you got to go back to what's the business basis for us making this decision, because in business there's always tough decisions that have to be made, and there's always upset when change occurs. Like no matter how you make change, inevitably somebody is going to be upset with change. And that's one thing as a business person, and especially when you want to go back to acquisitions, that's one of the biggest things you have to manage is change. Because no matter what, I was involved in an acquisition once where they said to us, nothing's going to change. Well, I learned very quickly that you never say nothing's going to change, because as soon as the name changes on the building or the side of the bus, that's change.
Yeah.
So
it's scary.
But emotion, that's emotion.
Yeah.
So when you manage your business, you got to understand there's always emotion. But I find through communication, if people understand and they understand the reasoning and the process, it takes some of the emotion out of it that, okay, I see why you're doing it. So in acquisitions, one of the things I'm very sensitive about is turning people, I could call it turning them upside down and shaking them. Because literally in any acquisition, you got to be careful because you don't want to spit people out of the process. You just got to introduce them to, there's maybe other ways to look at this. Or as I said, we move every acquisition over to the Switzer-Carty back office, processes, policies. And sometimes in smaller organizations, when we move in, they can see that as, oh my God, look at all this change. So we're very sensitive to that, and we manage that through a ton of communication and a ton of explanation on why, and here's how, and a lot of support. So we spend a lot of time with that because, and I got to say, our success rate with keeping employees on an acquisition, and we measure that, is well over 95% of the employees stay with us. So, and that's important to me because our whole goal is to help them. And, you know, obviously we have a business strategy and a business model, but not to spit people out through that. So, today, for example, it was very nice. I had one of the drivers came up to me and said, Jim, this is really good. Because like our training's probably a little more in depth than what they were used to in the past. But she said, I've learned a lot. So that's actually a positive, right? Or the other side of the coin is, well, I don't want to do that. But again, we circle it around safety. But in any acquisition, there's inevitably going to be change. It's just about how you manage that. And we're a growth company through acquisition and bids. And no matter, even when we bid into a new area, we're usually hiring on staff that work for other bus companies. So again, it's about change and managing change. And there's lots of emotion in that. I don't know how many times, if I got paid $1 for every time somebody told me, we've always done it this way.
You wouldn't have to sell your company.
So, the reality is that, I cringe a little bit when I hear that. But you have to be open to learn too, because I'm going to tell you, in every acquisition that I've done, I always look for what's the opportunity for us to change as the acquiring company. What's in that to learn? Because inevitably, companies are all doing great things that we don't have all the answers, and we've learned a lot from acquiring other companies.
I was going to say you must have learned even just the finest of details from looking at other books, looking at it, seeing, okay, why didn't this work for them? Yep. Why does it work for them? And then using that for your business.
Absolutely. I would say to anybody, if you go into anything and say that you've got all the answers, you're probably behind the 8 ball to begin with. I always go in and say, okay, what's unique about them? And what can we learn about this? And then is there anything we can apply to all the other 10 locations that we have? And inevitably, there's something you find and say, that's a great idea. Let's steal it. Let's now take it and put it in other places. So I think it goes two ways. It's not only, and that's the emotion of, I don't think I ever went into this saying, I've got every answer, and I've been in this business for 38 years. I know everything. I spend more time saying, help me out. Tell me, how does that work? Because, if you quit learning, I'd say you're starting to slow down and your competitors are going to run past you.
Yeah.
So, and so we look at it as a learning experience for our side as we're combing through things too. So
now what I'm seeing is just like, and we kind of, to circle back to the beginning of our discussion, is sticking to the basics of business is just crucial. And that's how you've built your business. You haven't done anything insanely complicated. You've just stuck to the basics, which in a lot of ways is the hardest thing to do in business, and not allow your ideas to destroy you. And I wanted to ask you, when dealing with an influx of capital, as you grow exponentially over 4, 5, 6 years, how do you stay sound in the ideas or the ideologies that you have around money, cash flow, capital, all of that? How do you stay level-headed?
I think it comes back to what we said. You have to know your business. And I think what's paid off for us is just a level of sophistication of the lessons we learned from our corporate experience and applying it to our small business. But it comes back to knowing the fundamentals of your business, what drives your business, what are the levers you have to have your hands on and your eyes on all the time. So I think in any business, the more sophisticated you are in knowing your business and where your business is going and the levers that affect it, then you're going to be more successful. And those things, my wife probably lost more sleep when we started this business than I did, for Doug and I think we had confidence in what we were doing and how we were going to go about doing it. And again, knowing what was really important. And, our business is pretty simple. We have to get kids to school on time safely every day. That's simple to say.
You've said that to me
it's
so many times.
But it's very complicated behind the scenes. But it's very simple to say. But reality for us, it comes down to people and strategy and sticking to it. We didn't waver all over the place. Even in those first 2 years where everybody else was doing the race to the bottom on rates and who do they take it in our industry, our single biggest cost is wages. So if you don't
Well, you've got
manage-
how many employees?
1,600. So wages account for 52 cents on every dollar for us. So that's a lever we got to pay attention to. But on the other hand, if you grind your way on that 52 cents, then you don't have people. So it was really a balancing act to us, and you couldn't win at low price and still be able to deliver
High
students
quality
to school and what parents expected, to keep their kids safe, on time, and get them to and from school every day. So for us, the strategy was we're going to stick to our guns in that first 2 years, even though we were pouring more money into the company than and not meeting our growth expectations. But again, we knew the market. We knew eventually parents' voices were going to be heard in terms of, I don't want my kid getting to school at 10 a.m. when school starts at 9. So we worked very hard at just sticking to our guns, and it paid off.
Now, we've grazed over this, and as we kind of come to a close, I wanted to ask you, you are a partnership business. You're partnered with Doug Carty when you started this business. I was doing some research prior to our discussion, and 70%, what I found was 70% of partnerships fail in businesses on average. 70%.
Yep.
So you are part of 30% of, miraculously, what most people even say is avoid partnerships.
Yeah.
How in the world do you manage to stay afloat? And I mean, I'm sure you've had your arguments with Doug, but really, how do you manage that partnership and stay within that 30% and not become that 70%?
Well, I'd say number one is you have to fit, right? So Doug Carty, from the time I met Doug Carty at the multinationals, Doug had come in as the CFO of our holding company at Laidlaw when we were in bankruptcy, actually. And he was the first senior executive. He was CFO of a $5 billion company, and he sits down in, at the time, my boss, the senior vice president of Canada, and me being the vice president of Canada, he asked to see us his first day on the job. His office was in the same building as ours. And he sat down for 45 minutes and asked us questions about the business, the industry. And we just went through a whole time of autocratic leadership and telling you how the business ran. And so I remember at the time, me and my senior vice president, my boss at the time, looking at each other when Doug got up and left and said, I think this is going to be a new day. Because he actually sat down and treated us with dignity and respect and asked us. So Doug, I ended up reporting to Doug, and that's how we got to know each other through the years there at Laidlaw. And he just treated people with dignity and respect and just a smart guy. And so when we saw the path that, it merged, the company had merged with another company, and it wasn't what we all stood for. So Doug and I would say, both had the same perspective. And the more we talked, the more we felt that we fit. His skill set, my skill set. And we ended up writing our business plan on a back of a napkin in a restaurant in Chicago. And,
really?
And it was, because we both were unhappy where we were.
And you had similar values that aligned.
Excuse me. Our values, and I would say any business partnership, your values better align, because otherwise there's a fist fight waiting to happen before you even start. And I would say in the 11 years, Doug and I had disagreements on things, but it was always a very respectful conversation. We never had a disagreement that ever, I would say, would have ticked each other off to the point of saying,
I'm done.
Never happened in 11 years. And we were on a trajectory of growth that was huge. So I would say that for Doug and I, the key to it was that we always treated each other with dignity and respect, and we had the same value system. There was never an argument on what our values were for the Switzer-Carty. We agreed, bang, 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 there they are. And we've stood by those and never really ever had a violent disagreement. But we came from different strengths, and we brought different things to the table that meshed perfectly. And then I would argue that with our senior team, we built to our weaknesses, and it fit like a glove. Dan Meriden, my vice president of operations, the best in the industry. Absolutely, bar none, best operations guy in school busing in Canada. And we go down the line of all the people that we put in our management team, we fit. So we have disagreements, but they're disagreements on an intellectual level, and we argue about things. And when I say argue, we have discussions.
Yeah.
And
very well laid out discussions.
Yeah. And it's more about what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, and what's the reason behind it. So I would say with Doug and I, we chuckle about it now because for 11 years, we never had knock him down, drag him out, fist fight where we ever thought this isn't the partner that I thought. It was always, we're meant to be. Yeah. And so it worked out well. So my advice is your values got to match. Otherwise, it's not going to be success because you can't repair that.
Hey, Jim, we rarely do this, but we've maxed out our time.
Oh, uh-oh.
Like, I don't think we've forever done this.
Yeah.
But this was one of the most in-depth discussions I've had on specifically business. Yeah. I love these discussions because this is where personally it's something that I'm craving to learn more of, and there's so many experiences, mistakes, wins, losses that you have to experience to be at the level that you are and understanding how business works and just the basics of business because they are the most crucial, but they're also the hardest to understand.
Yep. And you know what? Every entrepreneur's got a story, and I love listening to entrepreneurs' stories. And I look at our business, and it was fun, and it is fun for us. But reality is you're always learning, and people always have a different perspective. And as I tell you, my advice is free, and that may be all it's worth. So,
hey, well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening or watching to the Meeting Gold Show. If you want us to bring on more guests, such as Jim Switzer from Switzer-Carty, President and CEO, let us know in the comments down below anybody that you want to recommend, and we'll definitely take a look. Feel free to comment, subscribe, and check us out on all of our different platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube Shorts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. On that note, thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next show.